A piercing siren splits the dawn, red and blue lights flooding Oakwood Heights as a police helicopter thunders overhead, spotlight pinning a lone figure in a garish pink skirt suit. Maggie Thornton, HOA tyrant, clutches her clipboard, screaming into her phone about a dangerous resident over curtains. Her absurd 911 call has unleashed chaos, but she doesn't know the calm voice on the line is Mia, the homeowner's wife, orchestrating a lesson in justice. One refusal sparked this suburban showdown, exposing secrets that'll unravel Maggie's reign. Like, share, subscribe for more epic tales of comeuppance. In the meticulously curated enclave of Oakwood Heights, a pristine suburban neighborhood nestled in the outskirts of Seattle, every lawn was manicured to perfection, every mailbox gleamed in uniform silver, and every house seemed plucked from an architectural magazine's dreamscape. It was a place where order reigned supreme, but beneath this polished veneer lurked a suffocating web of rules enforced by the iron grip of the Homeowners Association, HOA. Ethan Carter, a 32-year-old software engineer with a penchant for quiet mornings and strong coffee, had moved here 3 years ago with his wife, Mia, a 30-year-old 911 dispatcher whose calm under pressure was the stuff of legend. They'd come seeking tranquility, a place to build a life away from the chaos of the city. But tranquility, they soon learned, came at a cost, namely navigating the whims of Margaret Maggie Thornton, the 48-year-old HOA president who ruled Oakwood Heights like a monarch with a clipboard. Maggie wasn't just a stickler for rules, she was their living embodiment. Her blonde curls shellacked into a gravity-defying helmet, her pastel skirt suits, often in shades like bubblegum pink or lavender glow, announcing her presence like a warning siren. She patrolled the streets with the vigilance of a hawk, her eyes scanning for infractions. A bicycle left out past the 15-minute limit, a tulip daring to bloom in an unapproved shade of coral, or, God forbid, a fence painted chestnut brown instead of the mandated earthen taupe. Ethan and Mia's first brush with her came 6 months after moving in, when a certified letter arrived, accusing their fence of violating the HOA's color palette by a microscopic degree. Only a spectrophotometer could tell the difference, Ethan had muttered, tossing the letter aside. Mia, whose days were spent fielding life-or-death emergencies, found Maggie's antics darkly amusing. At least she's not faking a heart attack to get attention, Mia would quip, her eyes twinkling over her coffee mug. But Ethan, who worked from home and bore the brunt of Maggie's scrutiny, felt differently. Their house, a modest 2-story with ivy climbing the porch, seemed to draw Maggie's attention like a moth to a flame. Perhaps it was because Ethan had once, during an HOA meeting, politely corrected her claim that the association could dictate mailbox heights to the inch. He'd cited the bylaws, page 47, paragraph 3, earning a glare that could have melted steel. Since then, Maggie's random inspections of their property had intensified, each one a test of Ethan's patience. Their house, a modest 2-story with ivy climbing the porch, seemed to draw Maggie's attention like a moth to a flame. Perhaps it was because Ethan had once, during an HOA meeting, politely corrected her claim that the association could dictate mailbox heights to the inch. He'd cited the bylaws, page 47, paragraph 3, earning a glare that could have melted steel. Since then, Maggie's random inspections of their property had intensified, each one a test of Ethan's patience. It was a crisp Wednesday morning in October when the latest skirmish began. Ethan was savoring a rare moment of peace, his laptop open to a half-finished coding project, a steaming mug of coffee in hand. The doorbell shattered the silence with a sharp, insistent ring that carried the weight of impending trouble. Ethan sighed, already suspecting who it was. Peering through the peephole, he confirmed his fears. Maggie Thornton, clad in a blindingly pink skirt suit, stood ramrod straight, her clipboard clutched like a holy relic, her her lips pursed in a way that suggested she'd already judged him guilty. He took a deep breath, braced himself, and opened the door. "Morning, Maggie," he said, forcing a neutral tone. "What brings you here today?" Maggie's eyes, small and sharp behind her cat-eye glasses, flicked past him, scanning the interior of his home like a detective on a case. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice clipped and devoid of warmth, "I'm here to conduct an interior aesthetic compliance check. It's come to my attention that your living room curtains may violate the HOA's seasonal decor standards for autumn." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "Curtains? Since when does the HOA regulate what's inside my house?" He leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "And who exactly brought this to your attention?" Maggie's lips twitched, a flash of irritation crossing her face. "That's confidential, Mr. Carter. As president, I'm obligated to ensure Oakwood Heights maintains its cohesive aesthetic. The bylaws grant me authority to inspect any element that impacts community standards, including window treatments visible from the street." Ethan raised an eyebrow, his patience already thinning. "Maggie, I've read the bylaws cover to cover. There's no clause about interior inspections without resident consent. If you've got a specific rule, show it to me. Otherwise, this sounds like you're making it up." Her cheeks flushed, the pink of her suit seeming to pulse with her indignation. "Are you accusing me of fabricating regulations, Mr. Carter? This is an official HOA matter. The autumn aesthetic mandate was discussed at last week's meeting, which, I note, you failed to attend." "I wasn't notified of any meeting," Ethan shot back, his voice steady but firm. "And even if I was, I'm not letting you waltz into my home to critique my curtains. This is private property, Maggie. You need a warrant or a bylaw, and I'm betting you don't have either." Maggie's eyes narrowed, her fingers tightening around her clipboard. "You're obstructing an official inspection, Ethan. That's a serious violation. I could have you fined, or worse." "Worse?" Ethan couldn't help but chuckle, though his amusement was tinged with exasperation. "What's next, Maggie? Calling the SWAT team because my curtain rods don't match the neighborhood vibe?" Her face hardened, and for a moment, Ethan thought he saw a glint of something deeper, something personal in her gaze. "Don't tempt me, Mr. Carter," she hissed. "You think you're above the rules, but no one defies the HOA on my watch. I'll do whatever it takes to maintain order." Ethan held her stare, refusing to back down. "Send me an official notice, Maggie. Cite the rule. Until then, you're not stepping foot in my house." He started to close the door, but Maggie's voice cut through like a knife. "This isn't over, Ethan," she called, her tone rising with a mix of fury and triumph. "You'll regret this. I have resources, you know. I can make things very difficult for you." He paused, one hand on the doorknob, and turned back. "Resources? What, you're gonna call the curtain police? Be my guest." He shut the door, the click echoing in the quiet house. Through the peephole, he saw Maggie scribbling furiously on her clipboard, her lips moving as if rehearsing her next move. He shook his head, returning to his coffee, now lukewarm. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that Maggie's resources were about to collide with a force she couldn't predict. Mia, sitting at her 911 dispatch console, her headset on, her fingers poised over the keyboard, ready to field the next call. And when Maggie, in her righteous fury, decided to escalate this curtain crusade to the authorities, she'd unwittingly set the stage for a reckoning that would shake Oakwood Heights to its perfectly trimmed core. Unbeknownst to Ethan, Maggie's obsession with their home wasn't just about control. A whispered rumor among the neighbors, one Ethan had dismissed as gossip, hinted that Maggie had a side hustle, funneling HOA funds to a consulting firm owned by her cousin for aesthetic audits that justified her intrusive inspections. The curtains, it seemed, were just the latest excuse in a scheme to flex her power and pad her pockets. As Maggie stormed off his porch, dialing her phone with a flourish, Ethan sipped his coffee, oblivious to the storm brewing. He didn't know that Mia, his sharp-witted wife, was about to pick up that call, her voice calm and professional, ready to turn Maggie's overreach into a lesson she'd never forget. The battle lines were drawn, and Oakwood Heights was about to witness a clash where curtains, of all things, would spark a suburban spectacle. Unbeknownst to Ethan, Maggie's obsession with their home wasn't just about control. A whispered rumor among the neighbors, one Ethan had dismissed as gossip, hinted that Maggie had a side hustle, funneling HOA funds to a consulting firm owned by her cousin for aesthetic audits that justified her intrusive inspections. The curtains, it seemed, were just the latest excuse in a scheme to flex her power and pad her pockets. As Maggie stormed off his porch, dialing her phone with a flourish, Ethan sipped his coffee, oblivious to the storm brewing. He didn't know that Mia, his sharp-witted wife, was about to pick up that call, her voice calm and professional, ready to turn Maggie's overreach into a lesson she'd never forget. The battle lines were drawn, and Oakwood Heights was about to witness a clash where curtains, of all things, would spark a suburban spectacle. Maggie Thornton, her pink skirt suit a garish beacon against the manicured green of Oakwood Heights, stood on Ethan's lawn, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice climbing to a fevered pitch. She was mid-rant, her words sharp and urgent, as if she were reporting a hostage crisis rather than a dispute over living room curtains. Ethan watched from behind the blinds, his coffee forgotten, a mix of disbelief and growing irritation swirling in his chest. He couldn't hear every word, but snippets of non-compliant resident and threat to community standards floated through the crisp morning air, punctuated by Maggie's dramatic gasps. She paced like a general plotting a siege, her heels clicking on the flagstone path, her clipboard swinging like a battle standard. Ethan shook his head, muttering to himself, "She's really doing it. She's calling the cops over drapes." What Maggie didn't know, what made this moment deliciously ironic, was that the calm, professional voice on the other end of her 911 call belonged to Mia, Ethan's wife, who was sitting at her dispatch console, her headset framing her face like a crown of quiet authority. Mia recognized Maggie's voice instantly, its shrill cadence unmistakable from countless HOA meetings she'd endured. As Maggie's accusations poured through the line, Mia's fingers danced across her keyboard, logging every exaggerated claim with meticulous precision, her lips twitching with the faintest hint of amusement. At the 911 call center, Mia's voice remained a beacon of professionalism. "Ma'am, can you clarify the nature of the threat?" she asked, her tone steady, betraying none of the recognition she felt. "Is the resident making specific threats, or do you see any weapons?" Maggie, caught in the heat of her own narrative, didn't hesitate. "He's defiant, completely unhinged," she shrieked, her voice cracking with indignation. "He slammed the door in my face, refused to let me inspect his property. I'm out here, vulnerable, while he's probably hiding something illegal behind those curtains. I demand immediate police intervention." Mia raised an eyebrow, her screen glowing with the incident log. "Illegal, ma'am. Can you specify what you believe he's hiding? Are you in immediate physical danger?" Maggie faltered for a split second, then doubled down. "I don't know what he's got in there. Contraband, maybe worse. His attitude is threatening, and I'm not safe standing on his lawn. He's mocking me, smirking through the window like some criminal mastermind. I need officers here now, and maybe a tactical unit, just in case." Mia's fingers paused over the keyboard, her mind racing. A tactical unit for curtains. She bit back a laugh, keeping her voice even. "A tactical unit, ma'am. Are you stating there's a credible threat requiring specialized forces, and are you requesting medical assistance for yourself due to this encounter?" "Yes, exactly," Maggie snapped, her voice rising to a near hysterical pitch. I've under immense stress. My heart's racing. I might collapse. Send paramedics. Send everyone. This man is a menace to our community's order, and I won't stand for it." Mia typed rapidly, her notes capturing every word. Caller requests tactical unit, paramedics, cites stress-induced medical emergency. She leaned back slightly, her mind already mapping out the protocol. "Understood, ma'am. We'll dispatch the appropriate resources. Please stay in a safe location and remain on the line." She muted her microphone for a moment, allowing herself a quiet chuckle. Maggie had just handed her the perfect opportunity to let the HOA president's own hubris unravel her. Back at the house, Ethan peeked through the blinds again, catching Maggie's triumphant smirk as she lowered her phone. She shot a glance at his window, her eyes gleaming with vindication, as if she'd just summoned an army to enforce her curtain crusade. Ethan leaned back, exhaling sharply. "She's lost it," he muttered, half expecting a squad car to roll up any second. But what he didn't anticipate, what Maggie couldn't have predicted, was the scale of the response Mia was orchestrating, not out of malice, but by simply following protocol to the letter. Maggie's demands for everyone were about to be met with a precision that would turn her petty power play into a neighborhood spectacle. Minutes ticked by, and Maggie's pacing grew more erratic, her confidence waning as no sirens immediately pierced the quiet of Oakwood Heights. She redialed 911, her voice now tinged with impatience. "This is Margaret Thornton again," she barked into the phone, her clipboard tucked under her arm like a shield. "Where are your officers? This situation is escalating. He's probably shredding evidence of his violations right now." Mia, still at her console, answered with the same unshakable calm. "Ma'am, units have been notified, but calls are prioritized based on immediate threats to life or property. Can you confirm any new developments? Has the resident made any overt threats since your last call?" Maggie's frustration boiled over. Overt threats? His entire demeanor is a threat. He's laughing at me, peering out like he's taunting me. This is an assault on my authority as HOA president. If you don't send someone now, this neighborhood will descend into chaos, lawns overgrown, mailboxes painted neon colors. I need action, not excuses. Mia's lips curled into a faint smile as she typed. Caller reports resident laughing, perceives it as taunting, demands immediate action to prevent neighborhood chaos. She responded, "We're taking your concerns seriously, ma'am. I've updated the incident log and resources are being allocated. Please describe any specific actions by the resident that indicate an immediate danger." Maggie, now pacing in tight circles, snapped, "He's got that smug look, like he's plotting something. For all I know, he's rigging his house with traps. I'm exposed out here, and my health is deteriorating under this stress. I need a full response, police, medics, maybe even a helicopter to get me out of this hostile environment." Mia's eyebrows shot up. "A helicopter?" She typed the request, her fingers flying. "Ma'am, you're requesting air support for a medical evacuation due to stress, and you believe the resident may have traps or weapons." "Yes," Maggie cried, her voice now a mix of desperation and bravado. "He's unpredictable, dangerous. I'm practically a prisoner on his lawn. Send everything you've got." Mia's voice remained steady. "Understood. We'll escalate the response based on your report of a potentially armed and dangerous individual and your medical emergency. Please stay safe and hold the line." She conferenced her supervisor, relaying Maggie's exact words. "Caller insists on full tactical response, air support, and medical evacuation for stress-related concerns. Reports resident as potentially armed, setting traps." The supervisor, after a moment of stunned silence, authorized the escalation, standard procedure for such extreme claims. Mia smiled serenely, knowing Maggie was about to get exactly what she'd demanded, perhaps more than she could handle. Back on Ethan's lawn, Maggie's triumph was short-lived. A distant siren broke the morning calm, followed by another, then a third. Her eyes lit up, her posture straightening as if she'd summoned the cavalry. Ethan, now standing at his front window, felt a mix of dread and curiosity. "She actually did it," he whispered, watching as the first police cruiser screeched around the corner, lights flashing. But then another appeared, followed by a hulking police SUV. Neighbors began to emerge, their faces a mix of alarm and intrigue. Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly widow next door, clutched her cardigan, whispering to her husband, "Is there a terrorist in Ethan's house?" Before Ethan could process the absurdity, a low, rhythmic thumping filled the air. He looked up, and there it was, a police helicopter, its blades slicing through the sky, its spotlights sweeping across his front yard. Maggie's hair whipped wildly in the downdraft, her clipboard nearly flying from her hands. She waved frantically at the arriving officers, shouting, "He's in there, the threat is inside." Ethan's jaw dropped. This wasn't just a power trip anymore, it was a full-blown circus, and Maggie was the unwitting ringmaster. The quiet of Oakwood Heights was shattered as the symphony of sirens reached a crescendo, transforming the suburban street into a scene straight out of a blockbuster thriller. 3 police cruisers, their lights painting the houses in red and blue, formed a loose barricade across the road. A hulking fire truck rumbled to a stop, its crew stepping out with a mix of curiosity and readiness. Above, the police helicopter's relentless thumping pounded the air, its spotlight intermittently sweeping the lawn where Maggie Thornton stood, her pink skirt suit now disheveled, her hair a chaotic halo in the downdraft. She waved her clipboard like a flag of victory, shouting to the arriving officers, "He's the one, he's defying community standards." Ethan, standing at his window, felt a surreal mix of amusement and disbelief. The absurdity of Maggie's curtain obsession had summoned a small army, and the neighborhood was now a stage for her self-inflicted drama. Neighbors clustered on their porches, whispering, their phones raised to capture the spectacle. Ethan knew Mia, his wife, was behind this escalation, not out of spite, but by expertly letting Maggie's own words dictate the response. As a 911 dispatcher, Mia was a master at following protocol to the letter, and Maggie's demands for everything were about to bury her in consequences. Ethan decided it was time to step outside before the situation spiraled further into chaos. He opened his front door slowly, hands raised to show he meant no harm. "Officers," he called, his voice cutting through the din, "I'm the homeowner. I think there's been a massive misunderstanding here." A seasoned sergeant, his badge glinting under the morning sun, approached cautiously, one hand resting lightly on his holster. "You're the reported threat?" he asked, his eyes scanning Ethan, then flicking to Maggie, who was now gesticulating wildly to a younger officer, demanding they secure the premises. "That's what she claims," Ethan replied, keeping his tone even. "All I did was tell her she couldn't come inside to inspect my living room curtains. Apparently that's a crime worthy of all this." He gestured at the cruisers, the fire truck, and the helicopter still circling above. The sergeant's brow furrowed. "Curtains," he repeated, his voice tinged with skepticism. He turned to Maggie, who was now marching toward them, her heels clicking furiously. "Ma'am, you reported an armed, dangerous individual. Care to explain?" Maggie puffed up, her clipboard clutched like a shield. "This man is undermining the HOA's authority," she declared, pointing at Ethan. "I'm the president, and I have a duty to enforce our aesthetic standards. He refused my inspection, acted hostile, and I felt unsafe. He could be hiding anything in there, contraband, weapons, you name it." Ethan couldn't help but laugh, though he quickly stifled it. "Hostile? Maggie, I told you to send me an official notice. You're the one who called in a SWAT team because I wouldn't let you critique my window treatments." The sergeant's eyes narrowed as he glanced between them. "Ma'am, you specifically requested tactical units and air support, citing a medical emergency due to stress. Is that correct?" Maggie nodded vigorously, oblivious to the trap she'd set for herself. Absolutely. I'm under duress standing here, exposed to his defiance. My heart's pounding. I might need medical attention any moment. A paramedic, who had been leaning against the ambulance nearby, stepped forward, his expression a mix of amusement and exasperation. "Ma'am, I can check your vitals if you'd like, but you seem pretty lively for someone claiming a medical crisis." The crowd of neighbors, now swelling with curious onlookers, murmured among themselves. Mrs. Jenkins, clutching her husband's arm, whispered loudly, "All this for curtains. She's lost her mind." Another neighbor, Mr. Patel, shook his head, muttering, "This is why I never go to HOA meetings." The sergeant held up a hand, silencing Maggie's next outburst. "Let's get this straight," he said, his voice firm. "You called 911, escalated this to a major incident, and now we've got multiple units, a fire crew, and a helicopter burning fuel because of a civil dispute over interior decor." Maggie's confidence wavered, her eyes darting to the growing crowd. "It's not just decor," she insisted. "It's about maintaining order. If we let people like him flout the rules, this neighborhood will fall apart. Lawns will go wild, houses will look like circuses." Ethan crossed his arms, unable to resist. "Maggie, the only circus here is the one you've created. You want to talk about order? How about explaining why you've been billing the HOA for your cousin's aesthetic consulting fees? I heard you've been funneling our dues to her company for these so-called inspections." A collective gasp rippled through the neighbors. Maggie's face went pale, her clipboard slipping slightly in her grip. That's slander," she sputtered, but her voice lacked conviction. The sergeant raised an eyebrow, sensing a deeper story. "Is that true, ma'am? Are you using HOA funds for personal gain?" Maggie opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes darting nervously. I'm conducting legitimate business. My cousin is a professional consultant. This has nothing to do with his refusal to comply." The younger officer, who had been reviewing a tablet with the call log, chimed in. "Dispatch records show you claimed the resident was potentially armed, setting traps, and that you needed an airlift for a stress-induced medical emergency. Those are serious allegations, ma'am, and they've triggered a full-scale response." The fire captain, a burly man with a no-nonsense demeanor, stepped forward, his arms crossed. "That helicopter up there," he said, pointing skyward, "it costs thousands per hour. The fire truck, the paramedics, all of us pulled from other calls. For what? A decorating dispute. You're looking at a hefty bill, lady." Maggie's bravado crumbled, her shoulders sagging as the weight of her actions sank in. "A bill?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I was protecting the community. He's the problem, not me." The sergeant shook his head, his patience visibly thinning. "Ma'am, refusing an HOA inspection isn't a crime. Filing a false 911 report, wasting public resources, and escalating a civil matter into a supposed emergency, that's a problem, a big one." Ethan, still standing on his porch, felt a surge of vindication. He hadn't asked for this circus, but Maggie's overreach had backfired spectacularly. The neighbors, now openly chuckling, began to disperse, some shaking their heads, others snapping photos of Maggie's increasingly frantic gestures. Mrs. Jenkins called out, "Maybe next time stick to measuring lawn heights, Maggie." The sergeant turned to Ethan. "Mind if we take a quick look from here, just to confirm there's no threat?" he asked, his tone professional but laced with understanding. "Go ahead," Ethan said, stepping aside. The sergeant peered through the open door, noting the cozy living room, the offending curtains hanging innocently in the window. "Looks like a house, not a fortress," he said dryly. "No traps, no weapons, just some fabric." Maggie, now cornered, tried one last defense. "You don't understand. His defiance sets a precedent. If everyone ignores the rules, we'll have chaos." The paramedic, checking his watch, cut in. "Ma'am, the only chaos here is what you've caused. Want me to take your blood pressure, or are you ready to admit this was a mistake?" Maggie's lips quivered, her eyes darting to the helicopter, the fire truck, the officers now conferring in a tight circle. The reality of the costs, financial and reputational, hit her like a freight train. She clutched her clipboard as if it could shield her from the consequences of her own making. Ethan watched, his earlier frustration giving way to a quiet satisfaction. Mia, he knew, was sitting at her console, her work done with surgical precision. She'd given Maggie exactly what she'd asked for, a response to match her wild claims, and in doing so, exposed the HOA president's hubris for all to see. The spotlight was on Maggie now, and it wasn't the triumphant glow she'd imagined. The chaos in Oakwood Heights reached a fever pitch as the police helicopter's spotlight carved erratic paths across the manicured lawns, its roar drowning out the murmurs of the growing crowd of neighbors. Maggie Thornton stood frozen on Ethan's lawn, her pink skirt suit now a wrinkled caricature of authority, her clipboard trembling in her hands as the reality of her overzealous 911 call sank in. The street was a tableau of flashing lights, 3 police cruisers, a fire truck, and an ambulance lined the curb, their crews exchanging glances that ranged from bemused to exasperated. Ethan, still on his porch, hands raised to signal his harmlessness, watched as the sergeant's stern gaze pinned Maggie like a specimen under glass. The neighbors, once content to whisper, now openly gawked, their phones recording every moment of the unfolding spectacle. Mia, Ethan's wife, sat miles away at her 911 dispatch console, her role in orchestrating this response hidden behind her professional calm. She had followed protocol to the letter, amplifying Maggie's exaggerated demands into a response that now threatened to bury the HOA president under the weight of her own hubris. But the drama was far from over. Maggie's desperation was about to ignite a high-stakes confrontation that would expose her deeper schemes and shake the neighborhood to its core. The sergeant, his patience worn thin by Maggie's shrill insistence, stepped closer to her, his voice cutting through the helicopter's din. "Ma'am, you've tied up half the city's emergency resources with claims of a dangerous resident. I'm looking at a man standing calmly on his porch, no weapons, no threats. You've got one chance to explain why you thought this warranted SWAT and an airlift." Maggie's eyes darted wildly, her composure unraveling like a cheap sweater. "You don't understand," she cried, her voice cracking with a mix of panic and defiance. "He's undermining everything I've built. The HOA exists to protect this community, and his refusal to comply is a direct attack on our values. I had to act. I'm responsible for order here." Ethan, unable to stay silent, stepped forward, keeping his tone measured. "Order? Maggie, you're out here throwing a tantrum because I wouldn't let you inspect my drapes. If you're so worried about community values, why don't you tell everyone about the consulting fees you've been funneling to your cousin's company? Is that part of your order?" The crowd gasped, a ripple of shock spreading like wildfire. Mrs. Jenkins, clutching her husband's arm, leaned forward, her voice loud enough to carry. "Is that true, Maggie? Are you skimming our dues for your family?" Mr. Patel, usually reserved, chimed in. "I knew those inspections felt like a scam. How much have you pocketed?" Maggie's face drained of color, her clipboard slipping to the ground with a soft thud. "That's preposterous," she stammered, her eyes flicking to the neighbors, then back to the sergeant. "I'm a public servant. My cousin's firm provides essential aesthetic guidance. This is all a lie to discredit me." The sergeant, unimpressed, crossed his arms. "Ma'am, these are serious accusations. If you're misusing HOA funds, that's a matter for the authorities, beyond this 911 misuse. Right now, you're looking at charges for filing a false report. You claimed an armed threat, traps, a medical emergency. None of that holds up." Maggie's desperation surged, her voice rising to a near screech. "I was scared. He could have been dangerous. You can't prove I lied. I felt threatened, and that's enough. I demand you arrest him for insubordination." The younger officer, holding a tablet with the call log, stepped forward, his tone dry. "Insubordination isn't a crime, ma'am. but wasting police resources is. Your call logs show you escalated this from a defiant resident to a potential armed barricade in under 10 minutes. You requested a helicopter for a stress-induced evacuation. That's not a feeling, that's a fabrication. A new voice cut through the tension. A woman in a crisp HOA jacket, Karen Walsh, the vice president, who had been watching from the sidelines. She stepped forward, her expression a mix of disgust and resolve. "Maggie, enough," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "I've been auditing the HOA books. Your cousin's consulting firm has billed us $50,000 this year alone for inspections that never happened. You've been signing off on fake invoices while harassing residents over nonsense like curtain colors." The crowd erupted in murmurs, phones now aimed squarely at Maggie. A teenage neighbor, filming for his social media, called out, "This is going viral. HOA scam exposed." Maggie's eyes widened, her hands trembling as she realized the tide had turned. "Karen, you're twisting everything," she snapped, but her voice wavered, betraying her guilt. "I've dedicated years to this community. You can't do this to me." Karen didn't flinch. "We trusted you, Maggie, but you've been using our dues to fund your cousin's lifestyle while terrorizing us with your rules. I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting tonight to vote you out." The sergeant, sensing the situation escalating beyond a simple 911 call, radioed for a supervisor. "Dispatch, we've got a potential fraud situation tied to this false report. Send a detective and a financial crimes unit." Mia, listening through her headset, typed the update, her fingers steady but her heart racing with quiet satisfaction. She hadn't planned for this twist. Karen's revelation about the fraud was new, but it fit perfectly into the trap Maggie had set for herself. Maggie, now cornered, turned to the crowd, her voice pleading, "You're all ungrateful. I've kept this neighborhood pristine. Without me, you'd have tacky lawn ornaments, mismatched mailboxes. I deserve respect." But her words fell flat, drowned out by the neighbors' growing outrage. Mr. Patel stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Respect? You've been fleecing us, Maggie. My wife spent weeks repainting our shed because you said the shade was too vibrant. Was that for your cousin's profit too?" The fire captain, wiping sweat from his brow, added, "Lady, you pulled us off a real emergency call for this. That helicopter up there, it's not a toy. You're paying for every second it's in the air." The paramedic, checking his equipment, muttered, "And don't expect us to fake a medical evac for you. Your blood pressure's fine, unlike your judgment." Maggie's eyes darted to the helicopter, its spotlight now fixed on her, casting her as her villain in this suburban drama. She clutched her phone as if it could save her and dialed 911 again, her voice frantic. "This is Margaret Thornton. Your officers are harassing me. I'm the victim here." At the dispatch center, Mia answered, her voice as calm as ever. "Ma'am, I see you're at the same location. Units are already on scene addressing your earlier report. Are you reporting a new emergency?" "They're ganging up on me," Maggie derided. "The neighbors, the police, they're accusing me of things I didn't do. I need protection." Mia's tone remained neutral, but her notes were scathing. "Caller claims harassment by officers and neighbors, denies fraud allegations, requests protection." She responded, "Ma'am, officers are handling the situation. False reports can lead to legal consequences, including cost recovery for resources deployed. Please cooperate with the on-scene team." The sergeant, overhearing Maggie's latest call, shook his head. "Put the phone down, ma'am. You're digging a deeper hole. We're taking statements now, and you'll have a chance to explain yourself to the detective." Ethan, watching the chaos unfold, felt a mix of relief and awe. Mia's precision had turned Maggie's power play into a public unraveling, and Karen's bombshell about the fraud had lit the fuse. The neighbors, now emboldened, began shouting questions. "How much did you steal, Maggie? What else have you lied about?" The teenager's video was already streaming live, the comments flooding with laughing emojis and calls for justice. A detective arrived, her notepad ready, and began questioning Karen and the neighbors about the HOA's finances. Maggie, realizing her reign was crumbling, tried to flee to her car, but the sergeant blocked her path. "You're not going anywhere until we sort this out," he said, his voice unyielding. "You've got a lot to answer for." Ethan stepped back, his role in the drama complete. He knew Mia was listening, her headset capturing every moment. Her professionalism a silent weapon that had dismantled Maggie's empire without breaking a single rule. The helicopter's roar faded as it banked away, its fuel costs another nail in Maggie's coffin. The neighbors, once cowed by her clipboard, now stood united, their voices a chorus of accountability. Maggie's reign of terror was over, and the curtains, those innocent, uninspected drapes, had become the symbol of her downfall. The dust settled on Oakwood Heights, but the air still crackled with the aftershock of Maggie Thornton's spectacular unraveling. The police cruisers, fire truck, and ambulance remained parked along the curb, their lights casting a surreal glow over the neighborhood as the helicopter's roar faded into the distance. Maggie stood alone on the lawn, her once impeccable pink skirt suit now a crumpled testament to her defeat, her clipboard abandoned in the grass like a fallen scepter. The sergeant and detective conferred quietly, their radios crackling with updates, while the neighbors formed a loose semicircle, their murmurs blending into a chorus of indignation and relief. Ethan watched from his porch, his arms crossed, a quiet satisfaction warming his chest. Mia, miles away at her 911 dispatch console, had orchestrated this reckoning with surgical precision, letting Maggie's own exaggerated demands bury her. But the final act was far from over. A deeper truth about Maggie's reign was about to surface, and the neighborhood would never be the same. The detective, a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, flipped open her notepad, turning to Maggie. "Miss Thornton, we're opening an investigation into your HOA financial dealings based on the allegations raised. Care to explain these consulting fees to your cousin's firm before we dig deeper?" Maggie's eyes widened, her voice trembling as she clutched her phone like a lifeline. "This is a witch hunt," she cried, her gaze darting to the neighbors. "I've poured my heart into this community. Those fees were for legitimate services, professional aesthetic oversight to keep our standards high." Karen Walsh, the HOA vice president, stepped forward, her voice cutting through Maggie's protests. "Legitimate. I've got receipts, Maggie. Your cousin's so-called firm billed us for inspections that never happened. Last month alone, you approved a $10,000 invoice for curtain compliance audits across the street. Nobody saw a single consultant." The crowd erupted in gasps, phones raised higher to capture the moment. Mr. Patel, his voice thick with frustration, called out, "That's our money, Maggie. We paid for your cousin's new car while you fined us for planting daisies." Maggie's face crumpled, but she rallied, pointing a shaky finger at Karen. "You're jealous of my leadership. You've always wanted my position, Karen. This is a coup, and you're all falling for it." Karen laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Leadership? You've been running a racket, Maggie. I checked the books. Your cousin's firm doesn't even have a valid business license. You've been skimming dues for years, and we're done looking the other way." The sergeant intervened, his voice firm. "Enough. Miss Thornton, you'll need to come with us to answer these questions formally. Misusing emergency services is one thing, potential fraud is another. You're not leaving until we've got a statement." Maggie's knees buckled slightly, but she straightened, her voice rising in a final burst of defiance. "You can't arrest me. I'm the backbone of this neighborhood. Without me, you'll all regret this. Your properties will lose value, your lawns will be jungles." Mrs. Jenkins, emboldened by the crowd, stepped forward, her voice quavering but resolute. "Lose value? Maggie, you made me repaint my mailbox twice because it was too reflective. I'm 82, and I spent my pension on your nonsense. You're the one who's devalued us." The detective scribbled notes, her expression unreadable. "We'll need access to the HOA's financial records, Miss Walsh. Can you provide those by tonight?" Karen nodded, her jaw set. "I've got everything. Bank statements, invoices, even emails where Maggie bragged about her consulting profits. The board's meeting tonight to remove her and freeze her access to our accounts." Maggie's eyes filled with tears, but they were less of remorse than of fury. "You'll ruin everything," she shouted, turning to the crowd. "You think you want freedom? You'll beg for my rules when this place falls apart." Ethan, who had stayed quiet, finally spoke, his voice calm but cutting. "Maggie, the only thing falling apart is your scheme. You turned a neighborhood into your personal fiefdom, and now you're facing the consequences. Maybe next time, stick to actual community service instead of inventing crises." The teenager filming the scene zoomed in, his voice gleeful. "This is gold. HOA tyrant gets owned. Live streams at 10,000 views." The neighbors laughed, some clapping, their fear of Maggie replaced by a collective sense of justice. The sergeant motioned to a female officer who approached Maggie. "Ma'am, we're taking you to the station for questioning. You're not under arrest yet, but you need to cooperate." Maggie, trembling, opened her mouth to protest, but the officer's stern look silenced her. As they escorted her to a cruiser, the crowd parted, their whispers now a steady hum of triumph. Ethan retreated to his porch, pulling out his phone to text Mia. "You're a genius. Maggie's done." He knew she was still at her console, her role in this drama, invisible but pivotal. Mia's response came seconds later. "Just doing my job. Curtain safe." Ethan grinned, typing back, "Safe and fabulous." That evening, the HOA board convened an emergency meeting at the community center, a squad building usually reserved for potlucks and yoga classes. The room was packed, every seat filled with residents who had endured Maggie's tyranny. Karen took the podium, her voice steady as she presented the evidence. Stacks of fraudulent invoices, bank transfers to Maggie's cousin, and even a damning email where Maggie boasted about teaching residents a lesson with her inspections. The vote to remove her was unanimous, the room erupting in applause. A new rule was proposed on the spot: no interior inspections without resident consent, effective immediately. Days later, the city delivered Maggie's bill for the emergency response, a staggering six-figure sum covering helicopter fuel, officer hours, and administrative fees. The detective's investigation uncovered a paper trail of fraud stretching back 2 years, leading to formal charges against Maggie and her cousin. The HOA's insurance rates spiked, but the board, now led by Karen, vowed to cover the costs without raising dues, using funds recovered from Maggie's accounts. Maggie, humiliated, put her house up for sale, but whispers of her scandal made buyers wary. Oakwood Heights began to breathe again. Lawns sprouted wildflowers, mailboxes gleamed in unapproved shades of red and teal, and Ethan installed a set of glittering curtain rod finials, a defiant nod to the saga. At home, he and Mia sat on their couch, the infamous curtains framing the window. "Think she'll ever come back?" Ethan asked, sipping a beer. Mia laughed, her eyes sparkling. "If she does, I've got the 911 line on speed dial, but I doubt she'll risk it. Her clipboard's probably retired for good." The neighborhood's newfound freedom wasn't just about aesthetics. It was a reminder that power, when unchecked, breeds its own downfall. Maggie's reign had ended, not with a bang, but with the quiet click of Mia's keyboard, turning her own words into her undoing. Ethan raised his glass. To curtains and consequences. Mia clinked her glass against his, her smile a silent promise that no tyrant, no matter how pink their suit, would ever hold their home hostage again. The saga of Maggie Thornton in Oakwood Heights delivers a sharp lesson. Unchecked power and petty tyranny can backfire spectacularly. Maggie's obsession with control, from dictating curtain colors to misusing HOA funds, led to her downfall when she escalated a trivial dispute into a false 911 emergency. Her hubris, fueled by fraudulent schemes, unraveled under the weight of her own exaggerated demands, exposing her to legal and social consequences. This story underscores the importance of accountability. Those who abuse authority or systems like 911 face repercussions when truth prevails. It also highlights the power of calm defiance, as Ethan and Mia's measured response, paired with Mia's professional precision, turned Maggie's weapon against her. Communities thrive on fairness, not fear, and Maggie's defeat proves that even the most rigid rules can't suppress justice. For anyone dealing with overzealous gatekeepers, this tale is a reminder. Know your rights, document everything, and don't let bullies hide behind false emergencies. The neighbors' unity and Karen's courage in exposing fraud show that collective action can dismantle tyranny. Want more stories of epic comeuppance and clever triumphs? Like, share, and subscribe to our channel to catch the next tale of justice served. Your support fuels these narratives, so hit that button and join us for more gripping sagas that unpack the wild, absurd, and inspiring moments of human conflict. Let's keep the conversation alive.